Hey, how's everybody out in YouTube land today? This is going to be episode 3 of Learn Lightroom Live with Josh Baker of Zulux Visuals. We're going to be processing some Milky Way photos, some astro, some of the Milky Way stuff we shot over the last month. So we went out in July, went out in August, so we're going to be showing that. Hey, Steven, can you can hear us, right? All right, mic's working. That's all I wanted to hear. We have that good pre-roll check. Yeah, so what we're going to be doing today is really just looking at how we can kind of make the most out of some of YouTube's, not YouTube, out of some of Lightroom's, some of Lightroom's features, especially some of the new features like clarity, texture, dehaze, and how to use those in a way that that can really bring out the best of our Milky Way photos. You know, the Milky Way photos by default come out very flat. The histogram is very narrow, and so we want to kind of push and pull those in a way that really brings out the vibrance and kind of some of the color that may get lost. You know, the night sky is tungsten. But shifting from daylight to tungsten, some of the gas cloud of the Milky Way kind of gets a little too blue, and so we need some of that red and kind of purple, magenta, pinks to come back in by shifting everything tungsten to make the sky, the color of the sky right. The Milky Way needs some of those warm tones to come back. The other thing that we deal with quite a bit is right, city light pollution. We're not out in these pristine conditions, right? We're in some, you know, hour, 2 hour, 3 hour away from cities, but we're still getting a pretty fair amount of noise from cities' lights, right? So we're still getting some of that light pollution. And so we kind of have a couple choices. One of those choices is we can either minimize the highlights in that area. So that's one way to approach it, is just darken that area with the Radial Tool. The other is to kind of give it, instead of giving it that sodium vapor yellow greenish, is to shift those colors to where it feels more like sunset. It's kind of funny. People always ask me, oh man, how'd you get the sunset in that photo? I'm like, no, that's just the city lights. and I feel bad for like wanting to like crush their dreams. They get very excited, like, man, that's sunset, you know, that's pretty cool. I'm like, it's not sunset, it's just the glow of the city. But just where we are, you know, we're coming to you live from deep in Pflugerville, Texas. There's just not a lot of clean dark skies around us, and so it's very hard to find you know, places that don't have any lights coming up from a city. Milky star trails are a little bit easier because we can kind of pick and choose where and how we want to compose the photo and what shape and what swirl we want to have, whereas with Milky Way, right, we're shooting the Milky Way, and so we don't really get a choice in our composition other than shooting in the direction that is, and so that can really limit where we're going and what we're shooting. So yeah, so the first thing that we're going to do is just bring out the Milky Way. And then I want to show you, if y'all are interested, maybe kind of how we do some advanced panoramas. I may open up a project that I've worked on. I don't know that I want to spend time like stitching a panorama together in PTGUI. It's kind of a laborious process, but at least give you like an overview of what it looks like. I thought that might be interesting. And then yeah, we'll just kind of go from there. So, Steven, it looks like it's just you so far. Is anybody else out there in YouTube land? Do we have anybody else out there that hasn't said hello? but it's good. I want this content. We're doing it live now, but I want it to be live on our YouTube channel because we get a lot of requests for this. We just taught a Milky Way class for precision camera, and so we had 15 people, and every one of them was like, "I'm really curious on how you process that," and so. Now, so it's good. It'll be up on the YouTube channel now. You'll be able to watch it whenever and kind of go back. So let me go ahead and flip over. We'll start in this view. So this is the first photo that I'm going to be looking at. Now I'm cheating a little bit. This photo is actually a 4-photo panorama. So I shot this at 16 mil, and then I did a stack. Bottom center, top photo, right? So these are the photos here. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and then this 4th one, literally the camera was pointed like, I don't know. I don't know that it was quite 180 degrees, but it was pretty close to being almost 180 degrees up with a 16 mil. And so we stitched those together. Let me show you how to do that right there. So we just take these nice 4 photos, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. They're in order. We would right click, photo merge, panorama. Okay. So photo merge panorama. Now, if you had done a HDR, right? So from that bottom angle, had done a low, a mid, and a high, and then the second angle, low, mid, high, and then a third angle, low, mid, high, and then fourth angle, low, mid, high. You could also do a HDR panorama, but our downside to this when we're shooting Milky Way is that usually we're already at exposure limits. So we're already at 10 or 20 or 30 seconds. So there's not really a lot of room to get those brighter exposures because we're already pushing so much to let the lights from the sky come in. So I haven't done a Milky Way HDR panorama, but that's how you would do it if you had a burst of 3 for each one. So in this case, all I did is panorama, and then I used the boundary warp feature to kind of flatten out the edges. So instead of having bowed, wavy edges, using that boundary warp kind of straightens out all those edges, and that kind of helps a lot. So here we are back at this photo. If you notice, it is called pano.dng. So this is Lightroom and Adobe's way. It creates a new DNG. It's really a TIFF and a DNG wrapper. So it's not quite a raw file, but it's close enough for our needs. And for me, it's the best if I can get it right in Lightroom. I prefer to edit in Lightroom because every other workflow outside of that is very cumbersome. So let's go ahead and start. So if I'm looking at this photo, I see this over here is kind of not great. But I'm going to fix that at the end. Okay. This is where Photoshop is really great. I'm not going to worry about that right now. And so for right now, all I really care about is getting the best kind of base file. All right. So first thing for me is always having the correct profile set. So in our last episode of Learn Lightroom Live, we did calibrating your cameras and calibrating your monitors. Okay. And so this was the profile that we created in that, which is 5D4 daylight. And so I just want to show you real quick the camera standard. Look how much I lose in the shadows versus when I have a calibrated one. You see that in the shadows, we have so much more recovery when we have a calibrated one. So if you're interested, go back and look at our last episode on how to do that if that's something you don't know how to do. But that's such a huge starting point. It makes all of our editing so much better, especially when we're already at the edge of what we can do with a file, right? We're already at, 3200 f4 30 seconds. That's pretty much at the edge of your exposure envelope. I don't care what camera you're shooting with. Maybe you have one more stop, but it's pretty close to being at the edge. So if you can make that edge cleaner, I think you're just helping yourself a whole bunch. Okay, so the first thing I like to do is I kind of create a general linear tool to take care of the sky. Now this doesn't necessarily pop out the Milky Way, but it's gonna start our process. And so what I tend to do, make the sky just a little bit bluer. I don't know, let's go with -10. and then we're going to add a little bit of texture, add a little bit of clarity, and add a little bit of dehaze. So this is just kind of the base. So what we're going to be doing, we're starting with big and working our way down to small. So I'm just going to click and drag all the way down. And it's not going to make a huge difference yet, but it's just that little bit of starting to pop out the stars a little bit more, and just kind of make everything look a little bit more focused on the sky. All right. Now that kind of takes care of that. I'm going to go ahead and work on the foreground just a second. I'm going to just do a global adjustment on my shadows. Okay. But watch when we do our shadows, watch how the sky, ooh, yeah, see, that's bad. See how the sky kind of goes away. And if I really want that sky to feel dark and inky, I kill my shadows. The Milky Way is still there. So a lot of times I will reduce my shadows in the sky as my base. So just for our global though, let's just base about 20. You know what? And let's go back, Gradient Tool, okay? And let's go back and darken our shadows in the sky just to give it a little more contrast. So if you notice, whenever you go out and shoot and you're in a darker area, so you're in an area that has less light pollution, your skies will automatically look more contrasty because there isn't light pollution and it's not all that dust and haze getting illuminated, right? Because there's light pollution, it is filtering, it's decreasing contrast basically. And so by darkening shadows, we're going to increase our contrast in our night sky. So let's just add maybe a -20 there. Okay. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. All right. So the other thing, at night, we lose so much color, partly because we're shooting at higher ISO. I am going to be boosting my vibrance much higher than I normally do. Hey, Mark, what's up, man? Good to see you for the second time today. So in this case, I'm going to be boosting it up to like 30, which normally I wouldn't do. But because we're shooting high ISO and because our initial exposures are so flat, we kind of need to really pump these up a little bit more. Okay, so let's just hit our Y button, and that's going to show us before and after, just to see kind of where we are before and after. Ooh, my computer doesn't like me today. Maybe because this is a pretty big image. No? Well, we're not going to hit Y because Lightroom is not happy with me. You know, let's close Photoshop for now. Oh, there it goes. Oh, that's kind of the before. Oh, because that's showing all my edits. That's where we're going to end up. Because this is a virtual copy of a file I've already edited. Virtual copies, for you, those of you who don't know, just think of it as another recipe card for the same ingredients that you have. So it's a great way if you want to make or try out a couple different edits, just right click and you can go to create virtual copy, and that will allow you to maybe try out a couple different edits on the same file. You're never touching the raw ingredients. All you're doing is changing treatments. So it's a way to create a couple different versions of the same file. Sometimes if I'm trying to do like a black and white versus a color, or I'm trying a new processing technique, it's a good way for me to just to have a couple different versions of the same file. Okay, so here we are. We're still working through. I'm going to jump down real quick to lens corrections, and I just want to, actually, I don't want that. I want to check to see that my stars don't have halos around them, and they don't. So no like really fringy ones. If you want to take care of those, if you go under lens corrections manual and use this eyedropper right here. So if there's any like really fringy areas like pink or like harsh greens, this is a tool that you can use to manually select those colors. But this one looks good. When I shoot with my 35 or my 85 more wide open, I get more fringing around the stars. My 16, because it's a wider field of view, each little point of light isn't as contrasty. And so it doesn't get those pink and purple and magenta, green stars. But that's where you would take care of it. Okay, so now we've already used our gradient tool to do a drop down for kind of the overall sky. And so now we're going to winnow our way down. So let's get this Milky Way. So now we're going to go to our Radial Tool, and I'm just going to draw a, I'm going to set it to clarity, and I'm just going to draw a kind of a long oval. Okay, I'm going to drag that basically the center, and then tilt it in the direction of the Milky Way. So if I turn on the selected mask, it basically covers this entire area. And so this is going to be another layer in our pyramid. So that first gradient tool is our base of our pyramid, and this is our second layer of our pyramid, and we're going to get smaller and smaller in our edits. And so in this one, I'm really going to jump up the clarity. I really like the texture for kind of that medium detail. And we're really going to bump the dehaze. Dehaze add localized contrast, which makes a lot of sense that we would use it because, like I said at the beginning, the night sky, when we captured on the field, right, we're just out getting good data. So it's very flat. So in this case, we want to expand that data out. So we're going to jump up that dehaze. I don't know, maybe let's just do 25 all around. And we're starting to see that we're getting more and more contrast. And I kind of want that center right on the galactic core. So see this galactic core kind of right here in the center? That's right where I want it to be. Now, the downside is, see how this selected mask is getting into areas I don't want? So if you hold your, if we go to brush and then erase, I'm going to set my flow to 50. And I'm going to delete it, that radial core, the radial filter where I don't want it. So I don't need all of those instructions populating down here at the bottom. And so I'm going to brush those out. Okay, and I set my brush to 50 because I just want a real smooth delete. Right, even over here, we don't need it. And I'm just going to kind of refine my edges just a little bit. But it's just a nice way to start getting a kind of wide galactic core, and then we're gonna bump it up even a little bit more with our brush tool. So we did a gradient, we did a radial, and as I take this off, okay, let's add a little bit of whites there to it. Okay, just a little bit, pop those stars are right here in the center. Okay, and so now we're starting to really kind of to bring out that core, but we started with a big, and now we're at a medium. And then what I want to do, let's go ahead and come to the brush tool. Okay, and so I'm going to add clarity again. I'm going to add just a little bit of exposure, maybe 0.2, and then I'm really going to pop the whites to come out. Okay, so let's add whites to maybe, I don't know, let's say 25. Okay, pretty big brush. Density 60. I don't want the whole thing. I just want to be able to kind of smooth it in. Okay, so I'm just going to start here and just kind of paint that in and see how everything kind of really pops out. And so I'm going to hit show selected mask again. If I hold the Alt key while I'm in the brush, it'll go straight to my erase It'll go straight to my erase. So by holding Alt, it'll erase brush. And I just want to make sure that it stays just in that galactic core and not all around the edges. You know, let me lower that, make it a little bit easier to see. All right, so I'm just kind of making sure that it's just in the areas that I want it to be. And my flow, again, is about 50. And that'll give me a little bit smoother transitions where it's not so I don't want the fall off to be too sharp. I want it to have a very smooth fall off in my brush tool. The other thing that I'm going to have, so that's kind of another good tool, that I'm going to come with a brush tool again, and I'm doing a separate brush because I want to have fine adjustments. So just in this area here, I'm going to go to color and just kind of this pink, kind of this pinky magenta area, and I don't want anything else. So let's zero out the rest of that tool. Okay, and just right here, kind of right along this core right there, I'm just going to add, see how just that little bit of color comes back in, just that little bit of pink magenta. And where I don't want it, again, I can hold that Alt key and I can come back and erase where it went maybe a little bit too much over the edges, kind of around this tree branch and down in here. And so for a lot of what I do as I'm smoothing up, I paint in and then Alt and drag, Alt click and drag, and that's going to kind of give me a little bit more control over my files. Okay. So I haven't done anything with my HSL or my global dehaze, so we'll work on that for just a second, but we're getting there. Remember how flat we started and kind of where we're going. Okay, so I think the Milky Way is looking pretty good without it being over the top, right? So that kind of smoother. Now, the next thing I want to take care of as I'm working my way down is we have all this light pollution, which is the city of Burnett right over here in this left-hand corner. Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to my Radial tool, and those are highlights there, right? So let's do some negative highlights. Let's say -30, and I'm just going to drag, and I don't care that it goes off screen, but this is just the smoothest way for me to drag in, not drag in, but drag in those, to kind of kill the highlights a little bit there. Now you're left with a couple of choices, okay? You can either kind of leave that color the way it is, or if you wanted to, you could make that feel like a sunset, right? So just under temp, we can add warmth to it, right? And so now it feels, you know, even like 50 warmth, because again, our ambient exposure is for tungsten. So we're adding in some of that warmth. That may be a little much. Let's say +40, and then maybe a little bit more on the exposure. Now, if you see, it's also darkening this water, which I don't necessarily want. I don't really want this water to be all the way there. So again, I'm gonna go to the brush tool and erase, and I'm just gonna take it out of the water because I don't want my water to be orange. I want my water to still feel blue. Okay. So again, I like the Radial tool because I think it adds a very smooth flow, and it's a very nice way to get a very even. But then in the areas I don't want it to affect, I'm either going to use the brush tool and erase, or we could use our range mask. Now our range mask here isn't going to work great because the colors are, it's a harder area to use a range mask. I like range mask, but in this case, this isn't the use case for me. Yeah, Steven, adding that magenta with the brush tool, for me, I find the brush tools better in Lightroom. The Photoshop brush tools, to me, I like that Lightroom, you just add it once and it's not an additive brush. Whereas Photoshop, it kind of, each time you go over it, it adds more and more and more. Whereas I think this is a little bit smoother, and with more control, I can go back and adjust it later much easier. I might want to add more red, or I can change that color, or on that brush, right? I can, if I go back to that brush tool, I can maybe add something else to it, right? So it's this pink one right here, right? All it is that kind of pink, but I could come back and add, you know, just a little bit exposure just to that one there, right? Maybe, you know, 0.1 is, I kind of like that now, right? I think that's getting a little bit better. So again, I like it. I try to do as much editing as possible in Lightroom because I think that it is smoother. I think the edits are smoother, and to me, it's just more intuitive. You're right on top of things. You're editing the photo. It makes more sense. So for presence, I'm just going to add a little bit of global, just a little bit of texture, maybe just a little bit of clarity. I'm not really going to add a global dehaze because I don't want this to get too crunchy. Okay, so again, now we have our foreground that we want to deal with, and I want to make our foreground. Now, normally I would use, if I was doing landscapes, I would use a gradient tool, but in this case, I don't. I don't want this corner to become too dark, and so I just want this kind of area around the trees to get a little bit more exposure and a little bit more whites. I just kind of want to pop out those trees a little bit. I don't want the actual closest foreground. I want this kind of mid-ground brighter. So in this case, just the Radial tool, just to kind of accentuate the light painting or the light pollution actually from somebody's tent that we have on these trees there. Okay. So now we're looking a little bit closer. Now, something else I tend to do with these, you know, I really want the focus to be on the Milky Way, so I do use a gradient filter, and I'm just going to use maybe like a -2, -3, somewhere there, 0.2, 0.3, and I'm just going to drag in from one side, okay, and so that's going to darken this whole this whole right-hand side, and then I'm going to do it again from the other side, and it's going to kind of darken that side up for me just a little bit, so that again, the brightest part of the sky is that Milky Way. I want your eye going to the Milky Way because that's what we work so hard to get. So again, just kind of a very smooth gradient tool, just a little bit, right? Just a third of a stop as a way to dodge and burn those corners and those edges so that your eye goes to naturally where I want it to go. You know what? And this Radial tool down at the bottom, I actually wanted a little bit more. I want a little bit more out of that. Really see those trees off, because that's really the important part. Trees in this Milky Way. Okay. Now, as far as cropping goes, I don't really like this tree at all. And I don't like this bottom part. So let's go ahead and finish that. I'm going to go ahead and make it into back to a digital negative 3x2, and just move it and just get rid of these trees and come up. And you know what? I'll just get rid of that red. I just, you know, it's good. It's a panorama. We have plenty of pixels to play with. The original file is 4,300 by 6,300 pixels, which is enough to make a 20 by 30 print. And so now we're back to this. And so we don't have to clone stamp anything out. And I think that's a nicer composition anyway. Maybe the lower 20% on the trees, and all of that. So that's looking fairly good. If you notice, I really didn't play with my global controls as much as I normally would. I'm going to raise my whole exposure maybe just a touch. No, just a little bit, 0.1. Okay. And just to check to see, my blacks are a little bit off. Let's raise the blacks up just a little bit on my foreground. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I'm still blacking out there. That's okay. Let me come back to this original sky one that I did as well. And let's decrease the shadows and decrease the blacks in the Milky Way. And that's going to add more contrast without bumping up my brights. My brights are already bright enough, and I've already had control on that. So I'm going to darken my shadows and darken my blacks in the sky. And that's going to give more punch in the sky without, if I just added contrast or dehaze, it would also increase the whites, but I don't want my whites to increase. And so I'm just darkening my blacks, darkening my shadows. Ooh, yeah, that's looking kind of milky good there. I like that. Okay, so this file is pretty close to what I would want to be able to do in Lightroom. The last thing that I would do is take a look at my luminance channels. These kind of yellows and oranges, I'm going to darken. So just by clicking on this little radial button tool right there, I can drag it over into my colors. And I just want those colors to come down. I don't want them to be as bright. So those are my reds, my oranges, my yellows. Okay. Now, if I wanted to, I can make these blues and purples brighter. So with our luminance, right, we can just kind of click and drag inside here and see what they do, right? And so let's bump up our magentas as well. Okay, so we darken our red, orange, yellow. We brighten our blue, purple, magenta. Hey, Miguel, what's up, brother? And so we're getting a much better photo than what we started with, right? There's just a lot more going on here than where we started. I did another version of this, and it's pretty similar. It's not exactly the same, but this is what I spent a whole lot of time working on. It's fairly similar. I kind of like this more subdued approach, actually, that we just did. I think that feels better than where I started. Yeah. Now, if you notice, the noise is pretty high. All right, we can all agree that if we zoom in, that noise is pretty high. So this is actually where I would use Photoshop. So I've been using a Topaz Denoise, and that's been really good. And so what I do with that, I create another layer when I do the denoise, and then I kind of paint in or out if it over processes that galactic core a little bit much, and I just kind of layer mask that part out, and then let it hold for the rest of the file. I don't want to do this. So what I would do, right, we can right click, edit in Adobe Photoshop, right? So it's going to send it over to Photoshop now. Let's see how bad this gets. This hangs up. This Topaz takes a lot of. So I would Control J to duplicate my layer, right? Control J duplicates the layer you're on. Okay, and I would also kind of do a check to see if there was any planes or anything weird going on. So like, there's a little weirdness going on, like right there. I don't know if it's a plane or what, but I just kind of want that weirdness gone. I don't actually see any planes, which is nice. Yeah, that usually doesn't happen. And so what I'm going to do is run this through a filter we have called Topaz Labs, Topaz Denoise AI. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. Okay, so this is, nothing's been done to it. I'm just going to show you auto and then tell it that low light mode is on, because this was a long 30-second exposure. Let's hit update and see what it does. Now, usually when I'm using this, I'm drinking my tea, and this gives me a chance. I usually walk away from my computer for just a little bit to do it, because it is not the fastest program. I have a very fast computer. I'm running an i9 with 32 meg of RAM and a 2070 Super NVIDIA graphic card. So like, it's a pretty beefy system, but this just, this is a big panorama file. It's going to take a second. So if y'all have questions right now, this would be a great time to ask questions as we go through. Okay. Oh, look, see, it's already finished. So as we see, it does a good job of getting rid of a lot of that color noise. But I think it's a little bit heavy-handed here in the galactic core. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and hit apply. And then we have to wait for it all over again. Nice and fun. And so what I'm going to do is create a layer mask and then paint in the areas I want that noise to be reduced and areas I don't want it to be reduced. So, yeah. Yeah, Miguel, I use HSL a lot. Also, if you're shooting portraits, a little bit of bump to oranges and reds is going to brighten up the skin without brightening up everything else, especially if you're shooting against like the sky that's blue and you want the skin tone just to be a little bit brighter. Just drag that drag that dropper onto somebody's skin and bring it up, and it'll make their skin a little bit brighter as well. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to zoom in here just so you can kind of see. So this is the galactic core. This is the layer with noise reduction. If I turn it off, can we see the difference? So I'm going to create a layer mask. And then I'm just going to, I'm at gray. So I just kind of subtly want to, so it's not black, it's not white. And I just kind of want to add in a little bit of detail back. So I'm just kind of painting in with a little bit of gray. Instead of white or black, gray is that kind of middle. So this is like doing this at 50%. Okay. We'll just go all the way to black. And I set my brush to be 30%. And just to keep all that good detail back. I know it's a little bit noisy, but you know what? It's fine. So the rest of the file is going to be smooth. And then we're just going to take out some of that noise reduction to let those gases still look good. Yeah. So look at the water especially. Look how clean it looks versus there. Can y'all see that difference as we zoom in? Right, the layer without noise reduction, the layer with noise reduction, like that's substantial to me, and that's enough to make it worth the price of that plugin, right? I think that's a huge difference, and that's really going to show up in the print. Yeah, Steven, I have a pretty beefy computer. As much time as I spend in front of it, I don't play with processing power. So I don't. My electricity bill is pretty high though too, because we're always doing that. But man, I just love the way it takes care of that water. Just it really brings out that smoothness. So again, and look at the tree detail. Look at the bark going from really messy to really nice and clean. And so that's going to really look beautiful in the print. So that's pretty close. You know, I would touch up this area a little bit again. This edge I would darken up a little bit more, and I would darken up this area just a little bit more. But on a whole, you know, I think that's a really smooth way to get through. So I'm just going to hit layer, flatten, save, and then we'll bring that back into Lightroom. I'm going to just darken up that one side just a little bit more. And so it's going to come in as another one. So now we're back into this edit.tiff. Let's bring our gradient tool and let's just darken up that edge just again and kill the highlights a little bit more. There we go. That left edge was just bothering me just a little bit. If I wanted to make it darker just a little bit there, again, a radial tool, just the highlights, maybe -30, and let's just darken that corner just a little bit. I think that would be a little bit nicer. Yeah, I think that's a little bit smoother looking now. Yeah, that's looking pretty good now. Okay. Why Denoise, Miguel? Because it's better. But it's just a cleaner. It's just a cleaner way to process noise. I had it a little bit with Lightroom. Lightroom, I don't ever run I don't ever run denoise in Lightroom more than 20. I just don't think it does a clean job. I think that Topaz does a really clean job. I've tried other ones. I've tried Noise Ninja. I've tried, in fact, I have the Nick collection denoise. But man, that Topaz just does a clean job, and it gives me a little bit more control than a lot of the other pieces of denoise software that I've tried to use. And I've tried, I think, all of them. I've spent a lot of money on denoise software. But yeah, the Photoshop one for this method. Now, there's another entire method, and I try to do it here, where I shot multiple layers of the same photo, but I was out of focus. And so what I was going to do here, yeah, look, I even bumped the camera on that one. But what I was going to do here is a smart object median align, and that would also kill the noise pretty well, where especially for ASHA, if you're taking 4, 8, 16 files, right? Noise is random. And so for every frame you take, the noise appears in a random order. And so if you had, let's say, 8 files of the same and you aligned everything, you'd only subtract that which was random and keep everything which was there. And so that's a nice way to clean up noise, especially in astrophotography as well. I did that in for the Comet Neowise, and it really made a big difference. It really made a big difference. Again, let me show you how, just to show you how we did panoramas. Yeah, I did all this light painting and I was out of focus because I was mad at my software. I was trying to some other things. Look, those are all nicely out of focus. I don't know what I was doing. I was struggling. I was trying to get something epic to work and I did not get anything to work. That whole night was, I got a couple files. I only got like 13 files, but, so again, one of the things too, right? If you're shooting with a, let's say you don't have a super wide angle lens. Okay, here's an example. These photos were shot at 35 millimeters. So anybody with a 24 to 70, right, can do this, right? Anything. I'll show Stephen. I'll show you the smart object. I'll show you an example. I'll bring it up here in a second. Let me show you panorama while I'm inside of Lightroom, and then I'll show you the stacking. But this was shot at 35 millimeter, right? So 1, 2, 3, and so those were the left to right. Stephen, I think that's your hand right there on the Wimberley, by the way. And then up, and then middle, and then over again. Okay, so 6 files. And then what we do, right, select all those, right click, photo merge, panorama. And Lightroom can handle multi-row panoramas, which is really nice when it works. So we hit that, and what it yields is a file with a much wider angle of view. Look at this. Let it render for a second. But it's a much wider angle of view, and that was shot with a 35 millimeter. Okay, but this has an angle of view of like 120 degrees, which is wide angle territory, without all of that wide angle distortion. I really love this photo. I think it's beautiful. The only thing I wish is Lightroom had blended this area. I'll kind of draw it. I wish it had blended this area just a little bit better. But there's nothing I can do really about that. So I kind of like it anyway. I just think it's very peaceful and calm and serene. And there's even a little bit of light over here hitting these objects. But again, you know, with shooting panoramas, not even for astro, just for landscape, it's a way where you don't always have to carry a landscape, you know, super wide angle, right? You can shoot with a 24 or 30 or 50 even, and just shoot left to right, and you're actually getting really good detail, and you can stitch those very easily all inside Lightroom to create much wider angle of view portraits and much higher resolution. This photo, for instance, is almost 11,000 by 7,000 pixels. So you know what? That's going to be a pretty nice print. So yeah, this is actually one of my favorites, and this is just me testing what I was doing. But again, here's just an easy 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. We blended those a little bit later in the evening, and we got that. Also really like it. And I figured out the problem for those of you who were with me. I was using the Genie 1s from Syrup, but not the Genie 2s. And the Genie 1s can only do 2 rows, and I didn't know that. And Lens Reynolds sent me the wrong things, so I got to send them a note. But I was kind of frustrated by that. Okay, you know what? Let's take a look. Let me bring up the Denoise photos real quick if I can find them, just to show you kind of what I did, because it really reduced the noise. Yeah, here we go. So this is in Photoshop. Lonely Spec has a really great tutorial on this. I will put that out there. Lonelyspec.com. They have a really great tutorial on median align. But the concept of it is, again, that noise is random. And so the more you can stack, the less noise you'll have. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in. Now this was shot at with my 400mm lens at 5.6 at 1.3 seconds, because that was the speed I needed following the 500 rule to get the stars not moving. And so what this is, the stack attempt is these 8 photos, and I just picked 8 in a row. I brought them in and then I aligned them, right? Because it's moving. The sky is always moving. So I aligned them and then created a smart object with them, and then went to median blending. And so it's just taking out the randomness from each one. And so it's a much cleaner file. So look at the noise now versus without stacking. Like, that's a significant difference. Okay. Significant difference. I'd say 4-stop difference at least. And so his tutorial is really good. I'm still a newbie at this, at that part of it. But I know that it's there as a concept. And because I know it's there as a concept, it changes what data I collect in the field. And it really allows me to shoot higher ISOs, deeper depths of field than I might otherwise feel comfortable shooting, because I know now how I can subtract the noise after shooting a stack of maybe 4 or 8 of the same exposure. So this is a smart object, right? So this is a smart object. Yeah, you can kind of see it there. Yeah. Do y'all want to see PTGUI at all? Do y'all want to see like when Lightroom fails at panoramas? Yeah, how we doing? We doing good? We doing good? Whew. Let me go ahead and close that. Now I don't want to save. Let's close this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a brief overview of PTGUI. Now, it is not it is not for the faint of heart. It is not for the faint of heart. So this is 18 photos. So it's a 6x3. So 3 rows of 6 exposures each, shot with an automated pan and tilt module from Syrup, right? syrp.co. And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the bottom row. The middle layer is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And the top layer is 13, 14, 15 through 18. Now, my preference would have been that Lightroom could have handled this, but it couldn't. It never could find 2 of the files. It found them, but it didn't know where to put them. And where Lightroom fails is it doesn't know. There's no way to go back and tell Lightroom, hey, these 2 files belong there. This one does. Let's see. So it allows us to do things like point alignment. So we can go back and manually add these control points and say, hey, this is photo 1, this is photo 2. Here's where they overlap. And this is what I have to do. Go to photo 2, go to photo 3. Hey, these align here. go to photo 3, go to photo 4, these align there, and you have to do 4 or 5 points for each one. So this is very manual. If Lightroom is struggling, this is probably going to struggle, but this does give you those manual controls. So 4 and 5, I have to say, hey, this point of the rock meets that point of the rock. This little part of the reflection meets that part of the reflection, and so on and so forth. But the cool thing about it is this is very much very crazy software. Like, it's super powerful. You could easily create entire 360 by 180 files. We can go through lenses and give it very specific settings. We can give different image parameters for each ones. Like, I could boost the exposure on some of these, but not all of them. But the control points is how we align them. And then just look at all those settings, right? Does that not make you just like want to go like hug a teddy bear? And so you really have to, I probably have played with this for a month now, and I'm just starting to figure out what everything is meaning. And then it also opens up a bunch of windows and different things. And so it's not really playing nice right now because I'm trying to stream with it, but you can change the center point. It doesn't want to show you what the picture looks like right now. But you can change the center point and then manually move things around. These are all the different types of projections. So Lightroom only has 3 projections. It has spherical, perspective, and equilateral, and this has like 12 different ones that you can pick from. So a lot more control. You have, I mean, it's serious software. So my field of view right now on this photo is 220 by 110, which is kind of neat. You can also change the center point, so you can move where the center point is. So you would click and drag this, and you could change where the center point is and how everything bends around that center. So it's something that gives you a lot more control. I wish that it would show up, but apparently my graphic card is running at pretty high, apparently. So it's just something that, where if you're really trying to go like crazy, big panoramas, and Lightroom fails, this is kind of the next thing you would go to. I don't know, and it does the thing that I like about it, on top of all that, it does a really good job of blending, especially like where the lens correction is. So lens is vignette, and these are the raw files. And so it does a really good job of blending those, that lens vignetting. I think it does a really smooth job of all that. I can show you the file, the final photo of what it did. Let's see if we can make this happen. Nope. Oh, next day, previous day. There we go. And so this is what it ended up creating. Now, I blew out the exposure. This whole area is mud. I should have given it more exposure, and I didn't. I should have gone one more stop or two in my lower exposures. I wish I would have had. I wish I would have thought about it. I was trying out some new hardware, and I was struggling with it. And then we had this big cloud kind of roll in, and I wanted to do it again, and I got halfway through it, and this big cloud rolled in. So this is the best I could do. Steven, that's interesting. That's weird that it would blur out your foreground. Send me those files. I'll see if I can put it together in PTGUI for you. So, I'm pretty happy with it. My first go with it wasn't as good. But like, here's what Lightroom did. See this corner right here? Lightroom just missed that entire corner. It just missed it. And there was no way for me to tell Lightroom, hey, put that file there. It was just blue, and it didn't know how to blend just blue. I don't know. It was kind of frustrating. It's this file right there. That's the file. It didn't know what to do with it. So if you're doing panos, I do recommend something like 40 to 50% overlap. I find that I did those at 30, and I think that was a little narrow. I had very little overlap between files. If I did it again, I would probably go back between 40 to 50% between each layer. And so if you're doing it visually, just pick something in your frame, and as you move, just try to move it half the frame each time. And that's kind of a good rule of thumb. 40 to 50% is a good rule of thumb there. Yeah. And so this is, so that file that didn't blend in Lightroom, this is what it blended with in PTGUI. If it shows up, it's a big file. It's maybe like 120 megs. No, we're not going to play. Fun. Oh, let me close this because this is taking up all my memory. Yeah, this is 66 megabyte file. Let's try it again. So this is blended in PTGUI where Lightroom couldn't blend that upper left-hand corner. It's maybe going to display, maybe not. No. All right, well, such it is. But anyway, I could blend it in PTGUI, and I could also change like the horizon line and do a whole bunch more controls. So Lightroom's good. It's good that you can blend them as easy as you can with just one click. But if you need more power, PTGUI is where I go for more power. All right. How are we doing, y'all? We hanging in there? We doing good? Does anybody have any questions? And then here's my favorite one. This is let it render, but this is 16 files here. So Lightroom was able to blend this one, and this is 16, so left and right. And this one made a beautiful print. There it is. Yeah. Good. Awesome. Well, this has been episode 3 of Learn Lightroom Live, where we did some astro processing. Thanks for everybody for joining us. And yeah, if you have any requests for what y'all want to learn for the next time, just holler at me. All right, guys. Y'all have a great night.